This episode of Alternative Dwellings is brought to you in part by the company Swavs. More about that later in the episode.
Hey guys, welcome to our tiny home. My name's Derek Lovell, and this is the lovely tiny home that we spent the last 9 months building.
The Zilkers from Swavs are my favorite shoes I've ever owned. The mesh material they are made of is breathable, comfortable, and sweat wicking. I wear them sockless all day without any sweat or smell issues. They really are the perfect travel shoe. Because the worst thing about traveling is dirty, stinky socks, and the Zilkers solve that problem. Because of their flat sole and comfortable non-restrictive mesh, when you wear them you feel like you're still barefoot. They look great, they pack small, and at the end of the day, they are washable. Our friends over at Swavs want to hook our audience up with $15 off their first purchase. So to take advantage of that, use the coupon code DifferentMedia15 and click the link in the description. Now back to Derek and his beautiful tiny home.
It's sitting on a 24-foot trailer, then we've got a 1.5-foot extension on the back for utilities, and another foot extension on the front for where our kitchen and some storage is. And yeah, we're really happy with it. A lot of stress went into it, but now we're living in it and living the dream. We've been living in the tiny home now for 2 months, so pretty fresh. We've settled in pretty quickly though. I think it was night 2 and we already felt like it was home. Before we moved into this tiny house, we were living in a pretty large house downtown Victoria, but the hustle and bustle was starting to get to us, and I had counted 27 power lines in front of our house, which was starting to drive me a little bit crazy, and all these loud cars driving by all the time. And I just kind of got this calling, I think like a year before I even started building the tiny house, to just move out to the trees. And we now live in this like amazing protected bird sanctuary where it's silent all the time and all we get to see is trees. So it's a pretty big blessing. So hiding behind here, we've got an AC mini split, which is extremely cheap way to heat and cool your home. And then it just vents out the sides. I don't know what we were thinking when we built it. We should have built another opening cabinet here so we have access to it. So hopefully nothing goes wrong with it in the near future. It's going to be a little bit of work to get into it. Then we've got our water hookup here, which goes down into the ground. And we were extremely fortunate to have met people that were willing to put a lot of work into their property to get us all of the services that we really needed, because having sewer was kind of a non-negotiable for us. So that's all set up from the landowners, which is great. And then hiding back here, we've got a little setup here if we ever want to take this on the road, which I don't think we would because it's quite the beast and it's a lot of wear and tear on tiny homes to take it on the road. But anyways, that could keep you on the road enough to like wash dishes or have a shower or two. And then we've got a propane for our hot water and a propane for our stove. So that's kind of all hidden back here. We had thought about going off grid, but there was just certain things we really wanted. Like, we're huge cooks, like we're always in the kitchen, and to get a full off-grid kitchen would be really difficult, especially in Victoria with so much gray in the winter. Like, you're not going to get the solar you're looking for. Yeah, so eventually we just decided if we're going to do it, it's for us, it's got to have everything we need, and that meant all the full services. So it can run off a 30 amp hookup, but it's we have 50 amps right now, so we've got more than we need. And then to heat the water, which is, we wanted to like make sure we weren't going to like paint ourselves into a corner and not be able to get anywhere that could get us the services we needed. So this place can run off a 30 amp service, which is pretty typical for a tiny house to be able to get serviced at 30 amps. But in order to do that, we needed to have like the propane water heater, because that would have just made the electrical, I think, a little bit too high. So we decided to go for propane for that. Yeah, so this ABC pipe here was actually an afterthought. Sadly, I'll blame it on our plumber. He didn't put the vents in the wall as he should have. So this is the ventilation system to make sure everything actually flushes and drains properly. So it doesn't look as great as we'd like it to, but that was the solution we came up with. Having an outdoor living space is pretty essential for tiny house living, and we love to spend our life outside, like stretching or reading or having our morning coffee. So I think like a week after we lived here, we built this deck, which is a 10 by 12 deck. And something's gonna have to happen once winter comes, because it rains a lot in Victoria, as a lot of people know. So we're probably gonna get some type of awning or roof for here, so it can be an outdoor living space in the winter. Cool, so let's take a look at the inside. We gave a lot of space to the kitchen. A lot of tiny homes seem to kind of like squish that into like a galley kitchen, or maybe not allocate as much space, but for us, we love to cook and we host quite often. So we've got a full-size kitchen. A lot of people say it's bigger than some of their apartment kitchens. Yeah, almost a full-size stove. It fits like a baking sheet. We have a full-size fridge, and then we put a washer dryer combo unit in the kitchen, which maybe seems like a little bit odd for placement, but by doing so, it gives us this extra space of prep on the counter, which is really important for us. And yeah, this is great, and we're super grateful to have laundry in our tiny home, but it takes about 5 hours to do a load of laundry, so, and it rumbles the entire place. So you got to kind of time it well with what time you're going to bed and what time you're going to be out of the house, because you definitely notice when the laundry's on. And yeah, just did a couple like extra little things to make use of space. This is called a desk drawer, but you can replace your toe kicks with these mini drawers. So we just made this our junk drawer. Even in a tiny home, somehow you still hold on to a bunch of junk. And then this is like an extra drawer, which we usually put like extra Costco load of groceries and that kind of stuff in. So anywhere we could fit an extra little nook, we did, which is super essential to make use of the space. And then having like the open cabinets here for our dishes was something we really wanted, because I don't love doing dishes, and if you can just huck them onto there, it kind of saves some time, and I like the look of it as well. One of the original kind of motivators to build this tiny house was just like the design aspect. I had this vision kind of cultivating in my head, which was raw cedar and like dark masculine tones like grays and blacks, and like butcher block countertops. So the kitchen is kind of a testament of that vision, and I'm really grateful to be in a space that I love and was able to design from the ground up. And we really didn't have to sacrifice anything in this build. We've got space for every kitchen appliance that we had in our large home, and more than enough space to prep. We've got a little table here, which is also my desk in the day. And then if we're both eating at it, we just pull it over to the bench right over here. And we've had, I think, a dinner party of 5 people at it. So it's pretty great to be able to fit 5 people in a tiny house like this for dinner. And we've also brought it out onto the deck too, so it's definitely multifunctional. So originally in the design, I wanted to have the kitchen in the middle. I just liked having like being able to have a living room downstairs. But in order to do that, the kitchen would have been pretty small, and we wouldn't have had stairs for one. We've got a large golden retriever who needs the stairs to get up. And as I said, we host quite a bit. So to get our mums hiking up a ladder before and after bed is probably not the best situation. So all of that combined made us do stairs, and we're really grateful we did, because it's given us so much storage space that we wouldn't have had. So we've got kind of like spillover of shoes and kitchen stuff in this one. We actually were able to fit a full-size vacuum, which we use twice a day, because it's extremely hard to keep a tiny house clean. I don't know if anyone has mentioned that before, but definitely keeps us on our toes. And then this is clothes for 2 people. So my partner and I share both these closets, and we downsized quite a bit, but I really only like to wear a couple things I love anyways. So to have anything more than that is kind of just wasting space anyways. So that all fits nicely into there. And again, we didn't really have to sacrifice anything. This was another kind of key piece of the design, was to have multi-functional spaces, or like spaces we can kind of get away and have our own space. We both work from home, so to have the kitchen table as a desk and then this desk area as a workspace, that allows us to work from home the days that we don't go out and work elsewhere. So we love this little space. It kind of feels like its own oasis. Even though it's all in one corridor in the tiny house, that little bit of separation really makes it feel like you have your own space, which is super helpful. So then we can lead into the bathroom here. The only thing we really wish we would have had was a tub, and we tried to fit it in, but we would have lost this storage area that we have over here, which is essential to like toilet paper, paper towel, towels. We also have our cat litter shoved into the bottom, so it wasn't something we could compromise on. So we just kind of went all in and got made the shower look and feel how we wanted it to be. We wanted it to kind of feel like a masculine spa. And one feature we really love is this rain shower head that changes colors with the temperature. So it starts with blue as it's cold, and then as the water starts to heat up, it'll go green and eventually go red. It's running off the propane, so it might take 30 seconds or so. So I do miss having a bath, but other than that, this bathroom gives you everything you want, including a flushing toilet, which at first we were looking into a compost toilet, and I was open to it, but my partner was really not keen on a composting toilet. So we just were lucky enough to attract landowners that put sewer in for us, which is incredible. And yeah, tons of space in the vanity. And whenever people come to visit, we put their luggage underneath the vanity because it's a floating one. Try to keep everything tucked away. And then right here we've got our bench, which is kind of a couch, reading area, meditation space, also storage. That's where like our boots and stuff like that go, office space underneath. And then when we have larger groups over, we pull the table over and that becomes the kitchen space too. So then I'll take you up the stairs. This is our, what we call our social loft. So this is what we did in place of a living room, which also functions as a guest bedroom. So we've got a double size mattress here. This is probably our favorite room in the house. We do a lot of our reading in here, meditations, sound healing, and just like a general chill zone. And also our TV's in here. So yeah, we definitely spend most of our time in this space. And whenever we have friends over, this is primarily where we hang out. So then if you just come down the stairs and hop across to the ladder, this is the master loft. So up here we've got a queen size bed, which we originally had a 14-inch mattress at our normal house, and that did not work. So after a couple nights of banging our head on the roof, we decided we need to search for a smaller mattress, and that has made the space feel like a lot more open. And I talked about the bump out on the trailer that we used. That is up there. You can see we've got a little bit of room for storage, and we've actually got like a ton of room left in there that we could fit more stuff if we needed, but we've got a little cat den in there and they kind of take over the space. So we went back and forth in the design process quite a bit. We originally were just doing it to design something and maybe it be an Airbnb space. And then over the 9 months, we decided that we actually really love the space and we're really looking for a lifestyle change. So we decided it was going to be ours and we were going to live in it. But throughout the process of the 9-month build, we weren't quite sure. And so there were times where we cut things out of the budget that we wish we wouldn't have, and that main thing was having the skylights open. I think to get your skylights open was like an extra $300 or $400 each, and it was just not in the budget at the time. And now that we're living in here and it's the middle of the summer and the sun directly hits us, it'd be really nice to be able to have the loft windows open because it's really difficult to get the ventilation going properly. And I thought by having the AC mini split, which is right in the center of the home, followed by a fan right above it, that the circulation would just go great. But it somehow still kind of feels a little bit stagnant in the loft, so it can get quite hot on the summer days. So that will definitely be a little bit of an upside of winter coming. Yeah, because any day it's been rainy or cloudy, it's had a lot better flow. But that's pretty much the only thing we cut and that we kind of regret. Other than that, we're really happy with how everything turned out. So the original inspiration to build a tiny house was actually just my love for design and my love for creating spaces. And over the 9 months of the build, it kind of ebbed and flowed through, should we live in it? Should it be an Airbnb? Should we sell it? And it just went back and forth around that. And then a lot of stuff kind of unfolded in our lives, and the pressure of the matrix just became a little bit too much for us. And we were looking to break out of that, and we're in a transition of selling our business and trying to move away from like the hustle and bustle of downtown. And so moving into the tiny house was just kind of like a no-brainer. And going from spending like $3,500 a month on a mortgage to $1,000 a month to rent the space we're on was something that has drastically changed our life and has removed such like a heavy load off our shoulders. So that's probably the main reason we chose to live in a tiny house. And I just love like unique experiences, and I think this is something, once this experience is over, we'll look back on for the rest of our lives as such like a unique, amazing experience that we got to have. And yeah, it's definitely a blessing at this point in our life. I'd say the main benefit of living in a tiny house is probably the amount you're saving by not like having to work so hard just to like throw that away on a mortgage or high rent. And just like connecting more to the earth. Like I've always been very connected to like sustainable practices and whatnot, but when you see you're so much more connected to the space you're on when you're in a tiny home, because everything doesn't just disappear the same as it does when you're in a home. So you're really mindful of like the soaps you use and all those kind of things that add up. And we've really tried to reduce like our amount of recycling that we use, and just treat the earth a little bit better. So that's been like a huge insight in living in a tiny house. And like I said, we kind of had that awareness before, but it was just strengthened and developed from being in the tiny house. So a long time ago, my partner and I were actually living in a really small apartment in Toronto, and I hated it. It was such a shoebox. We were nowhere near nature, and it kind of actually motivated me to rethink like what living in a small space was like, because I don't think it was the fact that it was a small space, it was the fact that it wasn't laid out efficiently, and I just saw so much room for improvement. So that was kind of like the first thread of inspiration that came to us like about 5 years ago. And then we moved to Victoria, went through a bunch of like crazy lifestyle changes, finally bought a house that we were saving up for a few years, and it always felt just like a little bit too big for me. I loved it. It was home, but it just didn't feel necessary. It felt like a little excessive. And although we practiced minimalism as much as we could, when you have a big home, things just like start to fill up and you start to fill different spaces. And so once we did decide to move into the tiny house, there was a fear of like, can we go from living in a large house and host our guests, and we've got a large dog, like is our dog going to be able to survive in this tiny house? So all these thoughts were creating quite a bit of fear in us, but we just kind of kept pushing through it and decided, let's just take the risk, and if it goes horribly, we'll get a rental like a month or two after and we'll figure it out. And we were really lucky and super surprised that after night 2 we knew like it was going to work, and it felt great. And nothing actually, like to us, it doesn't feel small, it feels like we have everything we need. And thankfully, because we chose to do the stairs going up to the loft, our dog can get up and down the stairs, and he just kind of adjusted really quickly too. He just became an outside dog like the day we moved here. We actually couldn't even get him inside to sleep. Like he's always slept inside, and he wouldn't even come inside to sleep the first night. So he just like adjusted to being an outside dog immediately. So I think when you're forced to like deal with circumstances or environment shifts in your environment, you just naturally adapt, and it happens super easy. And I mean, the space is beautiful, so that made it really easy on us. But in terms of like going from large to small, it was a super easy transition. I'd say the biggest challenge of living in the tiny house is keeping it clean. It's constantly dirty, I think, because our dog is constantly going from outside to inside and carrying wood chips and pine needles in and out. So we fully clean the house twice a day. We also just like to keep a clean house. Getting used to like using the propane for like water in the stove was a bit of a transition, but it was pretty smooth. And other than that, nothing like super difficult other than trying to keep like the heat regulated in the house. That's a little bit of a challenge, but I would just recommend having windows open if you have a loft. If you have an AC mini split, maybe put it more towards the roof. We ran out of wall space, so it had to go a little bit lower, but in hindsight, I wish I would have cut out one of the windows and had the AC mini split almost right next to the ceiling, and then it would have traveled right over to the ceiling fan, and I think that would have dispersed the air better. But those are kind of things you live and you learn, and we did our best in the design process, and here we are. The building process of the tiny home was definitely a challenge. We originally wanted to kind of work with contractors from the ground up and try to learn skills and maybe do this again down the road. But we quickly realized we were far too busy in our regular daily life to build a tiny house, which is a lot more like building a house than you would imagine. Yeah, so we hired some people. We had some difficult times with some contractors. We realized after putting some work in ourselves that it wasn't really the work we liked doing, and we're more like the visionaries behind things. And like I said, we had a lot of stuff going on in our personal life and business life outside of that. So we decided just to kind of hire out fully from that point on, which was essential and was what we needed to complete the project and to get the level of like detail and craftsmanship that we were looking for. But it really raised the budget. So our original budget was around 50,000, and by the time we ended around like 92,000. So it was a huge jump in budget, and luckily we had that money saved up, but it was very stressful watching it drain, and we weren't really sure where that budget was going to stop. So once we were finally done everything and we saw the cap, it was a huge relief, because the winter we built this, it was super stressful, like dealing with the different problems that came up and dealing with the different contractors that were challenging us, and the increase in the budget. And so to have that all out of the way, and to have this like beautiful piece of art that we've worked on and everyone works so hard to create, it is definitely a huge relief. When we were first building the tiny home, we just I did a little bit of research, but I didn't want bylaws and permitting to keep me from going into this because they are not legal in Canada or most parts of Canada at this point. So I just said, let's just jump in with 2 feet and see what happens and do our best. So the first hiccup we hit was figuring out that the driveway, which was our driveway we were building on, was not actually our driveway. We found out through this process that our neighbors actually own the rights to the driveway, and so they weren't happy with us building on the driveway due to liability risk and whatnot, which is completely fair. And so we were forced to move the tiny house off the property within days, which was extremely stressful to try to find a home for a 24-foot trailer. And it was winter, or it was fall in Victoria, so it was starting to rain everywhere, and we didn't really want the budget to go any higher than we had planned, so that meant we were going to have to rent space. So that was kind of like the first challenge. Then we moved it to our neighbor's house, a different neighbor's house who offered their driveway, which was temporary, and that was okay. It kind of got us to where we needed to go. But once that timeline ran up, we just posted on like a local Craigslist site and found somebody that was renting out a space on their yard. And we moved it there to finish the build, but that brought its own set of challenges because it was basically sitting in a mud pile. And so the contractors were constantly bringing in like excessive amounts of mud that was starting to like have a huge wear and tear on the build. And that was fine for the first bit while it was all plywood, but as we started to put finishing touches and paint and that was getting all over everything, it was hard not to worry that all this investment was just getting trashed. To find the actual space we were living on now was probably, I want to say, the easiest part, but it still had its challenges too. But we had just posted again on that local Craigslist site and said, you know, the kind of people we are and the kind of lifestyle we're trying to create and the kind of space we're looking for and the kind of services we need. And within a couple days we found, or someone had reached out to us saying that they had a space that they were moving into and they'd be willing to kind of help us out depending on what we could negotiate price-wise. So we went back and forth for a couple months, and eventually we decided it just wasn't going to work because they couldn't get us the services we needed, and their own project was kind of going over budget, so to invest in the lower part of their property for our tiny home just wasn't going to happen. But then we just kind of decided to keep pushing, and we called them a couple months later and just said like, hey, what if we're willing to kind of pay double the amount you said originally for the space? Would you be able to put the extra money into getting the full electrical and the sewer in? And so the lovely woman who owns the property, she kind of crunched some numbers and figured that she would trust our word and put the money in and get the space ready for what we needed. And that was kind of the last hurdle we had to cross. And that was in the time we were finishing up the build, and we moved up soon after. So here we are. I personally would recommend this lifestyle to maybe not the average person, but anyone looking for a lifestyle shift, anyone that is into alternative living, anyone who's into kind of letting go of all their shit and just like trying something new, like trying to not be so much involved in the rat race. But if you're moving for a solo person, a single person, it's a no-brainer. It's super easy. I would highly recommend it to anyone single who's trying to like make a lifestyle shift. But if you're in a partnership, you definitely need to be good at communication and good at knowing how to give each other space when there is no space to give, which is something my partner and I don't really struggle with. We've always had a really tight-knit relationship and, you know, shared business life and deep personal life and all that kind of stuff. So for us to adjust to this like small space was kind of natural, but I could see for the average couple, like it may be a little bit difficult. I think a lot of people are pretty interested by this tiny home movement or like van life and how to simplify their life or how to like have to work less and how to have to pay less. So I think if you're inspired by this kind of life, the best thing to do would just be keep watching videos, keep talking to people you know that are doing it, try to get in the space and feel out like, is this a space that could actually work for me? And just start to like write down all your ideas, because there are endless ideas and it can be really overwhelming when you get to the design process of what route you actually want to go. So for us, writing down our values was probably the most important thing we did. And one of those values was space to host our guests. So that was making a social loft and like a proper kitchen. So those two things were really like key anchors in how we designed the space. If I had to sum up my personal philosophy on life, it's a complex one, but simplified, I'd say just like making room for the things in life that actually matter. Connecting to your heart and living through your heart and following your heart is probably the main mantra that I choose to live my life by. And I find when you live through your heart, almost nothing will make sense from a logistical standpoint, but if you feel it in your heart, then to trust in that and just to kind of push through the fear that the mind is always trying to drag you down with, and just go forward, because the heart will never lead you astray, and it can lead you to magical spaces, including this lovely tiny home that our hearts led us to. Yeah, and if you're more curious about the tiny home, I know you just watched the video, but we've got Instagram. Mine's Derek Lovell and my partner's Jeff Roberts. It'll be in the bio below, and we are always posting photos of our lifestyle and the tiny home and our beautiful dog, so check us out more there.
Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode in the Alternative Dwelling series. If you wanted to see more, a playlist is popping up right now where you can watch every episode we've ever made. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button, and check out the links in the description if you want to support this channel and this show. And we'll see you next Monday for another episode of Alternative Dwellings.